Somewhere beneath the surface of the Persian Gulf, a machine is waiting. It doesn't need a crew, it doesn't need orders, it just needs a hull to pass close enough overhead. 1/5 of the world's oil, 20% of everything the planet burns, cooks with, and flies on, moves through a channel just 21 miles wide. For 40 years, Iran has planned to close it. Not with an army, not with a single missile, with mines, cheap, silent, and almost impossible to see coming. This spring, they finally put them in the water. And in 72 hours, the United States made sure it didn't matter. This is the story of a war that almost started, and the 12 hours in a windowless room in Bahrain that ended it before most of the world even knew it had begun. Here's the part almost nobody reported. The mines were never the plan. They were the bait. To understand why a handful of mines can paralyze global trade, you have to understand what makes them so different from almost any other weapon on Earth. A missile announces itself, a warship can be tracked by satellite, but a naval mine does nothing. It just sits, patiently, for days, weeks, sometimes years. And that silence is the entire point. Iran's weapon of choice here has a name, the Maham series, specifically the Maham-3 and Maham-7. These aren't relics. They're modern, sensor-fused mines, and the way they detect a target is genuinely unsettling. Some trigger on magnetic signature, the simple fact that a steel-hulled tanker distorts the Earth's magnetic field as it passes overhead. Others listen. Acoustic sensors pick up the specific low-frequency rumble of a ship's engine and propeller, filtering out noise until they hear exactly the profile they're tuned for. And some measure pressure, the subtle change in water displacement as tens of thousands of tons of steel move above them. The most advanced versions combine all three. A mine that waits for a magnetic anomaly, confirms it against an acoustic signature, and only then measures the pressure wave, before deciding autonomously that this is the moment to detonate. That layering is what makes them so dangerous to hunt. A submarine, for all its stealth, is still a moving, breathing machine. It has a wake, a thermal signature, a crew making decisions in real time. A mine has none of that. It's not hiding. It's simply there, indistinguishable from a rock, a shipwreck, or a shadow on the seabed, until the one moment it chooses to act. Naval analysts estimate a single one of these devices costs a fraction, genuinely a fraction, of what it costs to insure a single tanker for one voyage through the Gulf. That's the doctrine in one sentence. Iran doesn't need to win a naval war. It only needs to make the insurance industry nervous. And by March, open source intelligence confirmed it. At least a dozen of these mines were already resting on the seabed in the one shipping lane the entire planet depends on. Here's why a dozen mines can move markets faster than an actual missile strike. And to understand it, you don't need to look at a map. You need to look at a spreadsheet in London. Every major tanker sailing through a conflict zone is covered by war risk insurance, a separate policy layered on top of standard marine cover. And the body that effectively decides how dangerous a stretch of water is, on paper, is the Joint War Committee, working out of the Lloyd's of London market. The moment that committee reclassifies the Strait of Hormuz as higher risk, premiums don't creep up. They jump, sometimes within hours. Ship owners suddenly face a choice: pay a dramatically higher rate to sail through, or don't sail at all. Multiply that decision by the hundreds of tankers moving through Hormuz every single month, and you get instant hesitation. Fewer ships enter the strait. The ones that do cost more to insure, and that cost gets passed straight down the chain. Oil markets react to fear, not just to actual damage. A single confirmed mine strike, even one that doesn't sink a ship, can be enough to spike the price of Brent crude within minutes of the headline breaking. Traders don't wait for confirmation. They price in the worst case immediately and sort out the details later. From there, it's a straight line. Higher crude prices raise the input cost for refineries from Rotterdam to Ulsan. Refineries pass that cost to fuel distributors. Fuel distributors pass it to the pump and to the transport and shipping costs baked into nearly everything else you buy. It's not an abstraction. A closed strait in the Gulf shows up weeks later on a receipt in a supermarket on the other side of the planet. That's the real weapon here, not the explosive charge inside a Maham-7. The panic it's capable of triggering in a market that runs on confidence, which is exactly why the moment U.S. intelligence confirmed mines were actively being laid, the response wasn't going to wait for daylight. Picture two realities happening at the exact same time. On the surface, in the hours before the operation, the Gulf looks completely ordinary. Tankers moving on schedule, commercial radio chatter, routine and unremarkable. To any observer without clearance, it's just another quiet night on the water. 200 miles away, inside CENTCOM's forward headquarters in Bahrain, it is anything but quiet. Screens tracking vessel movement in real time. Analysts cross-referencing satellite passes against a small number of Iranian craft that have deviated subtly from their normal patrolling patterns. Someone, somewhere in that room, makes the call that a specific vessel isn't patrolling anymore. It's laying ordnance. That's the moment the operation stops being surveillance and starts being action. U.S. assets move to intercept vessels suspected of actively deploying mines, not hours after the fact, but in the middle of the operation itself. This distinction matters enormously. A finished minefield is mapped, deliberate, and dangerous to clear. An interrupted one is fragmented, incomplete, and, critically, far safer to deal with because whoever was laying it never got to finish the pattern. There is no dramatic press conference the next morning, no triumphant statement, just a handful of vessels that quietly never reached their final position, and a strike group already repositioning before the sun came up over the Gulf. The tension in that scenario isn't the explosion, it's the silence afterward. The fact that the wider world kept sleeping through the exact hours that decided whether oil markets would panic the next day. And once the immediate threat was contained, the next phase began. Not with force, but with technology built for exactly this kind of invisible war. Clearing a minefield used to be one of the most dangerous jobs in any navy. Slow, manual, often fatal. That's changed almost completely. The first wave in isn't a person, it's a machine. Autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, are released from motherships and mine hunters to run pre-programmed search patterns across the seabed. No crew inside, no hesitation. Just hours of methodical, uninterrupted scanning. Their primary tool is side-scan sonar, sound waves fired at an angle across the ocean floor, building a photograph-like image of anything sitting where it shouldn't be. A sonar operator trained to spot the subtle geometric regularity of a manufactured object against the natural chaos of sand, rock, and debris can pick out a mine from a shipwreck with startling precision. Once a suspected mine is identified, it doesn't need a diver to approach it anymore. Smaller, remotely operated vehicles, tethered back to a ship or helicopter, carry the object to a safe distance, or more often, place a small charge next to it and detonate it in place. Helicopters play their own role here, towing sonar sleds low over the water at speed, covering vastly more ground per hour than a surface ship ever could. Paired with dedicated mine-hunting vessels, ships built with minimal magnetic signature specifically so they don't trigger the very weapons they're hunting, the modern clearance operation looks less like a slow crawl and more like a coordinated grid search, executed in parallel at speed. What used to take weeks can, with this combination of assets, open a safe channel through a minefield of this size in a matter of days. That's the detail that undercuts Iran's entire premise. The mines were never going to close Hormuz permanently. What they could do, what they were built to do, was buy just enough uncertainty to spike a market before a single ship ever took real damage. Which leaves one final question. If the outcome was always going to end this fast, why deploy them at all? Because the mines were never really a weapon. They were a message. Iran's deployment was almost certainly never intended to sustain a long blockade. It was proof of capability, a reminder to Washington and to the wider world that the regime can still threaten the one artery global trade cannot route around, even if it can't hold that threat for long. The American response sent an equally clear signal straight back. The vessels laying those mines were identified, tracked, and intercepted in near real time. The single most valuable asset in asymmetric warfare, the element of surprise, depends entirely on the other side not knowing you're already watching. That advantage is gone now, and both sides know it. For the moment, the Strait of Hormuz remains open. Tankers move, oil flows. On the surface, nothing has changed. But underneath, the calculation has shifted. Hormuz was never really defined by freedom of passage. It's defined by who controls the uncertainty, and for the first time in this particular standoff, that control moved quietly in the other direction. No headline called it a battle. No general stood at a podium to to claim a victory. Just a few vessels that never reached their final position, a minefield that technically existed for less than 3 days, and a market that never found out how close it came to a very different morning. 40 years of doctrine, 72 hours to unravel it. That's not the end of the standoff in the Gulf, it's just the latest move in one that's been running for decades. And the next one is already being planned, somewhere, right now, in a room nobody outside it will ever see.